Hello and welcome to the Revenue Marketing Report powered by CaliberMind. I'm your host, Camela Thompson, and today I'm joined by Riley Timmins. Riley, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Hey, Camela, thanks for having me. Hey, everyone, I'm Riley. I run marketing at a startup called Cacheflow. We're a deal closing platform for SaaS companies, so everything from quoting, managing subscriptions, and actually getting the deal paid and signed for. We sort of manage the end-to-end RevOps of that. And we also work with RevOps Co-op at Cacheflow. We are a very big fan and super excited to talk a little bit about what we've done with them over the past year today.
Yes, yeah, I'm super excited to talk about community marketing, and it's going to vary a little bit by the persona you're marketing to and the community you're dealing with, but the thought leadership approach your team has taken, I really admire. So could we talk a little bit why you take that angle?
Yeah, definitely. So I would say about the first maybe year or so at Cacheflow, we were pretty much just performance ads, primarily LinkedIn ads. And, we were finding it was really good for hitting that 5% of in-market audience. But as a new company, we obviously couldn't just be talking to the 5% of our already not that big TAM. So we were looking at, what are other ways we can get in front of RevOps folks being our number one persona, and community marketing came to mind. And what I really liked is, I've been in several different Slack communities where they really just kind of went for number of users over anything, and the sort of quality of the conversation, really the community part, it didn't seem to be that prioritized. So then when we found RevOps Co-op, I just joined sort of as a member. I found that, wow, there's actually real, authentic, engaging conversations happening here. And then started to think, I wonder if we could do anything with this group to reach our RevOps persona.
Great. Yeah. And as part of the marketing team on the RevOps Co-op, we're always looking for partners who are willing to really bring something to the table in terms of what people can learn. And I think Sarika and your team has really embraced that. When you're thinking about doing an event with a community partner like the RevOps Co-op, what things come to mind and how do you all plan for that?
Yeah, definitely. So I think we've done probably 4 community events online so far. One thing that we sort of the starting point is, when we're going through the list of topics, is doing like a really heavy reality check and thinking, does anyone actually care about this? Do I actually care about this? Because, we've all sort of had the topics where it's sort of the end goal of what we want the user to think, but that's sort of at the end goal of, after using our product for a year. And so when you really rewind that and think, okay, no, I'm talking to these people on day 0, you really want to choose topics that is fully set up for them to learn something within, the 1-hour time slot or whatever you have. And good things come from that. So we kind of took a bet on, let's just really try to be as value focused as we can, and then, see what sort of shakes out at the bottom. But really, focusing on sort of like the reality checks of, is this actually good? Like, is this something I would actually want to learn? And then also, like our team, we have one person with a RevOps background, but the rest of us all had very different backgrounds. So, and we really don't want to have, like imposter syndrome of teaching RevOps topics where, maybe we just learned about it ourselves a month or 2 ago. So we started looking out, what other partners can we bring on that have been doing this thing, for 5 or 10 years or even more. And so, yeah, we found a really good RevOps consulting firm called Domestique. We actually partnered with them. And so far, I think we've done 2 events with their founder, Reese, who just adds a really good touch of deep sort of technical expertise. And then we found out, which was really good, he's also great on live events too. So, like we can kind of help organize a little bit, help plan the event, but then we really wanted to bring in a sort of very technical person to help drive the conversation and provide that value.
And what's been so great about that is it reminds me of how you want to approach your content marketing, right? You don't want to just product spew the whole time. You really want to offer recommendations, advice, things that are really useful to folks that are adjacent to what you're doing and product agnostic. And then once you establish yourself as that subject matter expert, then people start coming to you. And, you're top of mind. They know that you guys really know your stuff, and it goes from there. So the webinar
Definitely.
structure, let's talk about that a little bit more. I really like how you've partnered with this deep, deep expert, and then you also have a high value offer that's part of that. Can we talk through the thought process on, what kind of tool we're going to give people as part of that webinar and how we gate it if we gate it?
Definitely. Yeah. So for the last few events we've done, we've realized it's a lot of things to remember in one short hour. So even though we want to be as clear and precise as possible, we also want to pack a lot into that hour. Again, to give the people the most value. And so, we could do the classic, like, well, let's just send the slides afterwards. But we also try to design the slides so that, we're not reading off them. So really we kind of had to figure out a sort of third approach. And I think what we figured out is, let's just sort of try to templatize all this. So we'll take the framework that we're talking about or the activity that we're talking about. I think so far we've done RevOps audit checklist and then sort of like a tech renewal tracker template. And what that does is it just allows us to be even more useful. So take that next step of here, this is what you do on your day zero to get started, on top of, everything else that we kind of just told you. But we really try to avoid, being the lecturer. And it's not like we're assigning homework, but we're sort of giving the very easy first steps of you can go and do this on your own today if you want to.
Right. Yes. And what I've noticed about these templates is they're not necessarily complicated. You don't have a lot of formulas and things tied into them. They're also not incredibly complex in how they're structured. So,
Yeah.
for example, with the RevOps audit, you really took the different areas of the audit that were focused on throughout the presentation, and then a readiness check of whether we're high, medium, and low, and whether or not it's a high priority. So it was very straightforward, but people went wild over it. Did you get direct feedback from folks?
Yeah, I'd say the feedback we got was mostly from the people that attended the webinar. So for those folks, we just dropped the link and, they can start using it right away. And to your gating versus ungating question, I typically like to ungate almost everything. So especially, if we spend, a day or two writing a big guide or a couple weeks putting together like a data back report, I really want the most amount of people to see and get value from that as possible. But we do want to start diversifying our channels a bit. So this was sort of a really obvious, good first thing to test as a gate. And really, it's just a basic like we just asked for your email. That's essentially it. We do maybe 2 email follow-ups. So really trying to not be sort of over spammy. But what we found from that is, that converts at about 15% from our website. So what's really awesome about that is instead of, just 100 people that showed up to our webinar, we can go and, actually give the value to the rest of the market, or in our case, at least everyone else that's visiting our website. So we actually offer that as sort of like a website banner drop down, because from our perspective, if you're not going to convert on a demo, which, 95% of people probably aren't in market, if you have above a 5% demo conversion rate on your website, I'd love to talk to you. That's very difficult to do. But this was sort of the next second level of, hey, we can still, stay in contact with these leads more than just one webinar a quarter or whatever. So yeah, that's kind of how we approach that.
Great. So the folks in the webinar, not necessarily gated because you already have the attendee information, but it's an asset that's available for everyone after that. And I like the create once, use many approach there. That's
Yeah.
really smart.
It makes my job a little bit easier.
So in terms of working with communities, I hear that you want to look for a community that has a lot of authentic engagement. Are there other aspects, and I'm not fishing for compliments, I promise, but are there other aspects about the team you're working with that you would advise people look for that's helpful?
Yeah. There's um there's one there's one that comes to mind. I find RevOps Co-op operates like a startup themselves, which I really like and value, being at an early stage startup. We've worked with some other communities where it's almost like a corporate branch of a much bigger, sometimes even public tech company. And it seems like, maybe they had the right intentions at the beginning, but now it's, sort of just a media or a marketing arm of a different company. Sometimes people know that, sometimes they don't. Um, but yeah, it just, it felt like you were, dealing with a larger agency. So I really like the approach where, and eventually I learned RevOps Co-op folks, they actually did have a startup at the beginning, and then the community was a pivot. So I just always enjoy working with early stage founders, but really appreciate, I'd say, the attention to detail, the responsiveness, the willingness to go above and beyond. That is definitely something I would look for. It's very hard to find. Outside of that, I would say, what are the sort of activities they're doing? So if it's only, like a few offerings, whether it's in person or virtual, it's hard to differentiate from those. People are gonna all the folks in the community, eventually they'll hit a point where they just go, I can't do another webinar this quarter, or like I can't go to another wine event during the week but what's cool about RevOps Co-op is the variety of offerings. So far we've done content collaborations, we've done webinars, we are about to do an in-person trade show conference. So there's a lot of avenues where you can differentiate and sort of keep the community excited to sort of try a new medium or activity.
And another thing I would say about the RevOps Co-op is it's pretty unique in that the founder, Matt, he comes from a RevOps background, and most of his team members also know RevOps really deeply. So it's one thing to pay attention to what people are talking about in the community, but it's another to know what resonates long-term versus it's a short-term trend that you can take advantage of. So I guess I would recommend that people look for a community where there is that expertise in the persona that you're marketing to.
Certainly. Yeah, that's a big one. And what's awesome for me, is I may have mentioned I don't have a RevOps background myself. I've a growth marketing background. But at Cacheflow, we're selling to RevOps and VPs of sales. So I had a lot of, learning to do before I could even write our own RevOps based content. But I've really appreciated, learning from the RevOps Co-op team along the way. And yeah, also just getting support on launching our own content. Like I probably mentioned before too, there's definitely times of imposter syndrome when you're writing or organizing an event around something you don't really know that deeply. If I go on a marketing podcast, I don't have to prepare at all. I can just kind of log on and go. But for RevOps events, I really want to feel like I'm prepared and saying the right things. So yeah, RevOps Co-op has been very supportive of that too, I would say.
Is there anything else you would recommend to other marketers trying to maximize their community engagement?
Yeah, I would say it's not just about the number of users, whether it's which community you join as a user or choose to sponsor as a vendor. It's really about number of engaged users. And this is something that you and I were actually talking about the other day, Camela, and I don't think anyone really measures this. I kind of suspect we'll start to see some form of this eventually, but it really comes down to, what's the percentage or what's the number of qualified users, and qualified meaning can I actually sell to them? Are they in the right geos? Do they have the right titles, the right firmographics? Because even if you have a webinar and 50 people show up, if 25 of those are your tier one sort of leads or ICP targets, like congrats, you just got 25 of your hardest to reach buyers all in the same virtual room for a full hour. Most companies would pay, tens of thousands of dollars for that to host a fancy dinner or something. And there's, lots more affordable options now. So yeah, it's number of engaged users. And I would say the way that you can kind of gauge that after you do the event is, yeah, looking at your like your CSAT scores, your Zoom comments, really what I kind of monitor when the event starts is, how many people are in the chat, like how many people are asking questions or chiming in with other ideas and things like that. I think that's how you can really gauge like how happy are people to be here. Another metric is, like how or what percentage of people are staying on till the end, or at least staying on for the majority of the time. I've been a part of some webinars where I log on and then I'm off within 5 minutes, or I just kind of mute it in the background. So it's really about percentage of engaged users, and that's yeah, difficult to find, but that's what I would look for.
Yeah, so I think when you engage with the community, what you should expect them to be able to give you are the demographics and firmographics of their general population. You should also look for a community that can bring you influencers in their community that are highly active and really well known in the community. And then finally, look for some partners who are engaging, and they're going to be moderating the webinar, but look for somebody who can jump in and get people excited and chiming in. Like maybe they go in the chat and ask some questions and get them going. There are some value adds that I think people should expect from communities that don't always happen.
Definitely agree.
All right. And this is such a great segue to our next topic, because we're going to talk about what to do after the webinar. And I think a lot of people have tried and true tactics that maybe don't produce a ton. What have you found that works?
Yeah, this is a very sensitive point, because you can either completely ruin the little bit of attention that you just built up with your audience on the last webinar, or you can conveniently guide them to the next step where they don't feel pressured to do it, but they feel like the next step is just obvious for them. And I've seen it go both ways. So really, I think what you need to have here is a little bit of patience, a little bit of empathy of where your user is, and kind of looking back and thinking, if I visit a website, even as a consumer for a B2C company, and all of a sudden I'm hit with hundreds of retargeting ads per day, or even for me, I just bought a new couch. I was researching couches for about 3 days, and there's some brands 3 weeks later, every other ad on Instagram, it's an ad for their couch. Little do they know I've already bought a couch. I have no interest in buying their couch, but they think I do. So as a marketer, I'm very cognizant of not over spamming. And so the way we translate that, is, let's say we finished the webinar yesterday, we get the lead list usually the day of. I'm typically only going to send 2, maybe 3 emails as a follow-up, and I'm going to only do a sort of soft sales pitch, or a demo offer on that last email. So the first email should be fully helpful of, hey, we're not sure if you made it. In case you didn't, here is the slides. Here's a quick text recap of what we talked about. And the recording will be coming out soon. Do you want me to email it to you? Or let us know if you have any other questions. And what's great about that too is, you'll actually start getting your replies. So that's going to help you deliver other emails to those leads or contacts later on. You'll also get real feedback. But yeah, just really trying to, pretty much like an administrative thank you for joining us. Here's what you missed sort of email, which is especially important for the people that registered but didn't join. Then on the second email, what I'll typically do is share that template. So sometimes if the recording is available, I'll share it then, but I'm really just trying to remind them of what the template is. Here's how you use it. Here's why you would use it. And if you don't have the link already, here it is. What's also great, is they're going to be able to share it with other people in their network. Maybe they clicked the link during the webinar, but they didn't save it. So what's really cool is, even if we do a Google Sheets template, you can kind of see like the anonymous little animal bubbles in the top right. Sometimes I've logged on and I've seen like 30 different people in there at once the day after an email is sent. So yeah, if you're using Google Sheets, tracking is going to be a little bit more limited, but There's some things to look for there. And then I would say the final email. So whether it's number 2 or number 3, I'm essentially trying to connect some part of what our platform can do with something that we talked about in that webinar. So for the example of the RevOps audit, I think the pitch was something like, hey, after you've done your audit, and if you found that there's some gaps in quoting or subscription management or billing, we can help with that. I think I had something a little bit more fancy than just that, but basically trying to show like, hey, we can actually help with a specific thing that you just learned, not, hey, thanks for, giving us your email for our webinar. Now we're going to ask you to book a demo for the next 30 days. So that's basically how I would approach the emails. And, other things you can do outside of that, I would say are, of course you can add them to a retargeting audience. I think naturally they'll just get added by, visiting your website and the content pages and things like that. But yeah, it's not so much tactics of, having this crazy branched out this step, then this step, and then now let's go message them on LinkedIn campaign. I think it's a lot more about the content that you're sharing and just being mindful of not overstepping. What's actually interesting too is where we get most of our demos from. It's not even that third email where, we're offering a demo. It's usually the first email where we're just saying, hey, thanks for coming. Here's the slides. So it's really just about like presenting that little reminder of, oh yeah, by the way, here's what that company does that I just went to the webinar. Maybe now is a good time to go and take a bit of a deeper look. And yeah, it's usually email 1 or 2 where we see people kind of book that were on that original lead list.
That's so smart. I think we get the most complaints in the community from people who don't follow that value first structure. If people feel like they're being sold to right off the gate, no matter how good the webinar was, they get really irritated. You get an unsubscribe right away and they're out of your first party database. So I think treating them carefully and keeping them in your data pool is so smart.
Yeah, definitely. And because especially with this group of community members, right? Like it's not like they clicked on a Google ad or it's not like, they just happen to see a Facebook ad. It's people that you're going to market to over a very long time. And that's really, why we're doing the community marketing is for the other 95%. It's very different goals than the 5% of in-market ones that we're targeting. There's going to be some obviously similar, positioning and messaging. But in terms of what we expect out of it, it's completely different goals. So we approach it differently. Yeah.
Yeah. And as somebody who's been a partner of a community and from the marketing side, if you can find people who are customers in that community and somebody asks a question, I'm looking for, let's say, a CPQ tool or a quote to cash tool. Can anybody give me recommendations? If you can kind of nudge that customer to speak on your behalf, that's so much more valuable than somebody on your sales team trying to pitch in the string itself.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Definitely. Oh, and I was just going to mention, I've also seen a lot of companies, and it's something I've tried in the past too, is just joining all the communities and setting up keyword triggers, and as soon as a competitor or a keyword is mentioned, jumping in. And what I realized pretty quickly is people are going to communities not to get feedback from the vendors, but to get feedback from other actual users. Like if they wanted like sponsored reviews, they would just go to G2 and read the G2 reviews, right? So they're really going to communities as a sacred place of, this is where I can get like 100% authentic feedback. And so you don't really want to like interrupt that. I think there are some smart approaches. Yeah, like you mentioned, like getting customers or maybe third parties, but ultimately you kind of have to accept what that person is going to that place for. And you can market to them around the edges. So like you can market to them around the events, which is what, we find actually works. But yeah, it's all just thinking about, what's their goal? What's my goal? is there even any overlap that we can find here? Or if not, you know, maybe we'll make note of that person and see if they enter our CRM eventually, but let's just kind of like keep the goodwill for now.
I've also seen this work really well in, for example, Caliber Mine. We had attribution experts in the community. So they were answering questions about campaign structure and things that were very much adjacent. We had great documentation on how to implement this in Salesforce or HubSpot that they could just drop a link to. It's a very I think it's really good to catch people as early as possible and give them that value right away so they think, oh, these people know what they're talking about. Another thing
Yep.
that I think is super interesting too is, let's say you do a webinar and you can layer intent data on top of that. That could be really useful. So if they're going to G2 and checking out your brand specifically, or they're researching related brands, that's really great information to have and leverage.
Yeah. Yeah. There's definitely a play there to, you know, watch, but not reach out. So even something I do after a webinar, right, is once we put up that sponsored, or sorry, not sponsored, but the gated landing page is, you know, obviously I want to see like, okay, what are all the sources people are coming from here? So are they coming from the RevOps Co-op site where the blog recap is posted, or are they coming, you know, just from our banner? So yeah, you definitely want to keep track of those sources and sort of things. But yeah.
Awesome.
So something else that we actually do after the webinar, especially if we invite on guests. So I think our first one, we invited two VPs of RevOps from two different companies. And we kind of used it as a content generation recorded call. So of course we got a lot of marketing value from the people joining the webinar. But what we did after the fact, it was a webinar on how RevOps, you know, can enable renewals and expansions to drive more ARR. So even ourselves at Cacheflow, we were learning a lot of things from these VPs of RevOps. And instead of, you know, just doing a quick blog recap of here was the webinar, we actually made a bit of a bigger guide, kind of, you know, SEO optimized it a little bit to focus on SaaS renewals and expansions. And instead of, you know, us just writing about this and using screenshots from our platform, we were actually able to take probably five or 10 different quotes from the webinar and reference, you know, these people at other companies. So it just makes the guide a lot more legitimate. And, you know, you can kind of like crowdsource the ideas, have better visuals, things like that. So yeah, I would definitely say don't think you just have to do just a gated landing page or just a quick blog webinar recap. Going back to the repurposing thing, you can really repurpose for not just written content, but also video content. So yeah, probably the final thing here is the clips, right? Like we all love clips. They're huge on Instagram and YouTube and TikTok, seeing a lot more on LinkedIn. It's really the 30-second to the 1 minute highlights of what was talked about. And really what we're optimizing for here is just like the sort of golden nuggets of information that will either want the person to go and download the template that we were talking about, or you know, sign up for the next event. So typically our offer will be, hey, by the way, here's this audit that we were talking about in that clip. If you really like that clip, go and download this. Or, you know, we're going to be talking about very similar thing this time next week on our next webinar. So yeah, it's definitely a clips era. Figure out how to use them, because that is by far one of the best repurpose use cases you can do this year, I think.
And I think that's a fantastic segue. Unconventional B2B marketing tactics. Let's get into it. Maybe we start with tapping the channels where people aren't necessarily already getting bombarded with B2B ads, and how to do that without annoying people.
Definitely. Yeah. So I may have mentioned before, we are very heavy on LinkedIn ads. But what's funny is not a lot of our competitors use Facebook ads. So it's funny talking about Facebook ads as an unconventional tactic. But you know, I guess in B2B SaaS, it still kind of can be. I guess there's a lot of assumptions like, oh, our buyers aren't on Facebook. A lot of times people don't even realize though that Instagram ads really are Facebook ads. So, okay, maybe they're not on Facebook. They're probably on Instagram though, or one of the other networks they own. So that was something we probably layered on 6 months into doing LinkedIn ads. And the reason for that is, so actually every company I've been at, it's been a different ad channel that's been sort of the winner. So my last company, we were, very heavy Facebook ads. The one before that, it was very heavy Google ads. So I've always kind of had to adopt based on where the market is. But I had a lot of Facebook ads chops, and I was also seeing, okay, we can get a retargeting click for basically $2 on Facebook versus, probably $7 or $8 on LinkedIn, sometimes more. Um, but that wasn't even the main driver. The main driver was really kind of just like appearing bigger than we are. So as an early stage small startup, this is something that's always on the top of my mind. How do we appear bigger than we are? And this is just to help drive interest, but also help drive legitimacy and social proof, so that the companies feel confident buying from us or even booking a demo. But there's some catches here, right? I know we talked about not over spamming your audience. So kind of the trick here is having a high number of creatives. So a big mix of image ads and video ads. And really the way I think about ads in general, but maybe even more so Facebook, is you want to think like, what is everything that I want my audience to know about us? Um, I don't just want them to know that we want them to book a demo. I want them to know all of these things. So I want them to know the types of personas that buy from us, the types of pain points that we solve, the types of benefits that our features deliver, and then also the features themselves. And I want to prove that, with product screenshots, but also with customers saying it themselves. So when you kind of think of it that way, you can build up pretty quickly a pretty big library of ads. So even though you probably, like, even we only have a few thousand people in our Facebook ads retargeting pool, it's gotten harder over the years to actually retarget on Facebook. But I think, okay, if they were reading a newspaper every day, what is the one ad I would want them to see from Cacheflow? And so yeah, that's kind of how we approach it. You know, occasionally we'll have people be like, wow, we really see you guys everywhere. It's kind of a lot, but for every person that says that, there's probably 10 people that say, oh, wow, like I see you guys everywhere. It's funny. We actually had one lead tell us he was seeing our ad for probably 2 months, and he was finally ready, to look into CPQ. He couldn't remember our name though. So he actually just went on to Facebook. And then he said he just started scrolling. He's like, I know their ad will come up soon. And he's like, within 1 minute, your guys' ad came up. So yeah, really, to summarize the approach we take here, and we can actually see this on the back end and by asking people, is we want people to see us for months at a time so that when they're ready, they know who to go to and we're top of mind. We're not really expecting out of this 2,000 person audience, 100 people are going to book a demo right now, but we do expect, okay, we can influence almost all of these people eventually to know, who we are, what we do, why you would talk to us. And yeah, again, just to be really top of mind for when they are ready to tackle whatever business challenge that we can help solve. So yeah, that's I guess that's the unconventional way that we approach that for Facebook ads.
Well, the reason why I really like this is, one, I had a client tell me we have to do this because they saw you guys all over the place. But
Nice.
two, the big thing I want people to take away, and I know we have a lot of people at mid to enterprise size companies. There's a couple things. So one is we're all struggling with budget no matter how big we are. So taking this play and really starting to understand how to curate an audience on these advertising platforms that are super targeted and dialed into your ICP. And what's just as important as who you should be targeting is who you should be excluding. So figuring out how to layer those two together. The other thing here is the work we need to do to set the right expectations with our executive team. So like you said, you don't expect 100 people to book a meeting right away. This is a really solid awareness play where you're keeping your brand in front of people who may eventually be in market. So it's more about staying top of mind for when they eventually hit to the point when they're in a buying cycle than it is trying to force them into the buying cycle. So how, if I can ask, how do you have those conversations with your executive team and setting expectations on how this might play out?
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. So I think it depends, are you just starting to run ads for the first time, or are you trying to, maybe double your ad budget? Um, Also really depends on the company stage and if other channels are working yet or not. I guess the way that I approached it with our exec team when we first started is, hey, like this is going to take probably a month or two to start seeing some results. Um, but then once we start to see some, we can kind of learn and scale from there. So so yeah, like if we're gonna launch a new campaign, now I have some data to benchmark it against. Like I know roughly how much a qualified deal should cost. I know roughly how much a lead should cost. Um, but really, I guess when it comes to measuring success, yeah, you want to pick your point in the sales pipeline where everyone on the go-to-market team feels like that makes sense. So yeah, for us, it's essentially a sales qualified deal. And so that's what I'm kind of using to measure. But I guess to get started when you're, asking for budget, yeah, it's being clear that, you know, we're not going to see a return right away. But also we're optimizing for, sales qualified pipeline. We're not optimizing for number of leads. And yeah, there's tons of podcasts that will do a better job than me of explaining, the lead quantity versus quality thing. But I think that really is the core thing is all aligning like, hey, we're going for the best quality deals, and number of leads don't really matter because we're not playing the percentages to percentages and just see what shakes out from 2,000 leads. We're going from the beginning, let's get qualified people that want to talk. And yeah, the way you kind of do that is by really explaining in the ads without them having to click on the ad, how you can help them. So that's another part I probably forgot to mention. Majority of the ads we design it so that you never have to click on it, to get more information. And that's good for two reasons. One is because you don't actually pay for it unless they click on it. But two is majority of people aren't going to click on it, right? Like average CTR on LinkedIn is like 0.5%. It's a little bit higher on Facebook, but a lot of people will fully read an ad, or a lot of people will read the image copy, or a lot of people will watch like 30 seconds of your video ad. So yeah, even kind of like the webinar thing, right? Like you can't expect people to go like, oh, let me see part two on their website and then read, and then a lot of times they're going to a landing page that has nothing to do with the ad. So yeah, it's even within ads, how can you deliver value with like minimally interrupting their day? So yeah, a lot of people will see our ads, and think like, oh, like these are like really complicated or really heavy. Like, but if you're in our market, and we hear all the time, they're like, oh, like I actually love your guys' ads. Like I have a very good sense of what you guys do. I've been seeing it for 3 months. And we're just ready now. Or a lot of times is like, hey, our CEO saw your ads, and told us to reach out, or our CFO. So when it comes to measuring it, you don't just want to be looking at the in-platform conversions. You have to have this whole infrastructure, like, and it's not really that complicated, but essentially it's, it's like use UTMs, ask all of your leads how they heard about you on the first call. There's even some other third-party tools, like a hockey stack or a factors AI that can kind of show you, okay, was this lead served an impression, and then did they, click on your Google ad when they were ready to convert. So fill in as many blind spots as you can. But also when it comes to ads, like really what we're measuring, it's not only the leads that came from the ad platforms that we could track. It's just any lead that came from the website. Cause for us, like it's not like we have like a huge outbound sales team or SDR. So like we have a pretty good sense, unless any of us personally know these people, that they came from some sort of inbound channel and it probably started with ads. So that just, and the reason this is important is because it just gives you a lot more confidence in your investment. So now instead of saying like, hey, we spent 100 grand on ads last quarter and we got like 1 or 2 deals, we can say, hey, we spent 100 grand, but we drove like 400 or 500 grand of qualified pipeline. And of that, here's how much closed, here's how much is still open. And of course you want to, align yourself to revenue too, but it's just like a longer feedback loop. So being able to choose that, sales pipeline point, usually probably qualified pipeline for most people, is just going to make the whole budget thing much easier for getting buy-in and sort of like proving the value you're driving.
I think you avoided the soapbox, but I'm going to go for it because
Go for it.
I think not enough people understand that if you're focused on conversion rates and pipeline and your lead volume's low, but you're hitting your pipeline targets, no one on the executive team is going to be upset that you didn't bring in 1 billion leads. So aligning with what the team actually cares about the most is so important. And if they're fixated on the leads, they're focusing on the wrong part. If you're generating the pipeline, that's what really matters, right?
Yeah. Yeah. And look, and a lot of times I find, sales doesn't get excited to talk to the crappy leads.
No.
So if you bring them a smaller amount of good leads, they're going to start being your friend a lot more. And then if sales is on your side, you're going to have just a lot easier time in general getting more budget and more buy-in. So yeah, you're right. Like at a smaller startup, this is easier to do, especially for me in this case. Like, I've set it up this way at 3 companies. So now I know just from the beginning, I'm going to set it up this way. It is a lot more of a challenge if you're at a larger company. But yeah, by now, like every company should have switched or at least be in the process of switching. Because yeah, number of leads is pretty old school by now. I think sales just really wants the small amount of, really, really good quality leads.
Yeah, the closer to closing, the happier they are.
Yeah.
Let's just be honest. Riley, thank you so much for sharing your knowledge. Can you tell people where to find you to network and maybe where to find Cacheflow?
Definitely. Yeah. Well, thanks so much for having me on. I love doing podcasts and talking to other great marketers. You can find me on LinkedIn. It's Riley Timmins. Love connecting with marketers or, really anyone in the SaaS space. And then, yeah, also would definitely recommend you check out Cacheflow if you are an early stage SaaS company. We are essentially a combination of a CPQ and a subscription management platform packed into one. So really managing the end-to-end operations of creating quotes, closing them, managing renewals and expansions, and really focused on the UX side of that. So making it really easy for your sales team to get the quotes out the door and really easy for your buyers to buy your software, essentially.
Listeners, thank you so much for tuning in to the Revenue Marketing Report. Please tell 2 friends, subscribe, download, whatever you can helps. And for those of you looking for more great content like this, check out caliberbuying.com.